We're on.
Good evening. I'm John Pate, City Manager for the City of Opalaca. Today is my esteemed privilege to co-host, along with Gary Peterson, the CEO and President of Public Sector Search and Consulting, Inc., our finalist interview, our public interviews for our finalists. I cannot tell you how honored I am to be involved in this process and present these two outstanding candidates to our public. We're going to go over a host of questions. Our candidates will be able to answer those questions. After those questions are answered, the public will be allowed to provide input through a survey that will be posted on our website, our Facebook page, and widely disseminated on other pages that the City of Opalaca has control over. I look forward to the public input when I end up having to make the final decision who will be the next chief of police for the City of Opalaca. As you all know, the City of Opalaca has challenges in regards to crime and public safety related issues. So it is my goal, and has always been my esteemed goal, to reduce crime, violent crime, strengthen community-oriented policing, and ensure officers have the right leader in place to move the department to the 21st century, and establish goals that are essential to the operations of law enforcement agencies in this day and age. At this time, I turn this interview process over to Gary Peterson, who is over the search for the police chief search process. Gary.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. I appreciate the introduction. I also want to welcome the public to this virtual candidate interview for the City of Opalaca. As Mr. Pate said, I'm the President of Public Sector Search and Consulting, Inc. Out of California. Before we start interviewing the candidates, I want to kind of update everyone watching and explain how we got here tonight. So we started this process in late September. And I'm sure I don't need to remind everybody, but I'm going to anyway. In the middle of a global pandemic and national awakening on issues related to social justice, equity, racism, and police use of force. By September, more than 30 police chiefs across the nation had been fired or resigned. Even progressive-minded chiefs like Carmen Best in Seattle and Erica Shields in Atlanta. We started this process having all of that in mind and knowing this it was going to be a long, arduous process. We started by talking with the city manager, internal city staff, department heads, the police lieutenants, city council members, and the mayor. So I personally had conversations with all of those individuals. We also attempted to engage the community by sending out community surveys, asking for their input in the process. The surveys were translated to Spanish and Creole and sent out via social media and city email list. Unfortunately, we had very minimal response to the surveys, but we did engage in that interaction. So consequently, we took the input from the stakeholder groups that I've already identified and developed a brochure to advertise the position. We advertised in both national and state websites that we've found to find strong candidates in the past. We were able to recruit a total of 32 candidates, which based on what's going on nationally is more than I expected. We screened the candidates and presented a number of candidates to the city manager and his team for his consideration. After that meeting, we arrived on a number of candidates to interview, and we interviewed 4 candidates. And you'll hear from the top 2 candidates here tonight. At the conclusion of the event, there will be a display of a survey link, as the city manager pointed out, so you can give direct feedback, and that feedback is going to get directly to the city manager. So our format, with that having been said, our format tonight will be as follows. Each candidate will have an opportunity to introduce themselves. Then I will ask them a question, and then we'll rotate who answers first and who answers second, and each person will have an opportunity to answer each question. Each candidate will have 4 minutes per question. When they get to the 3-minute mark, I'll provide a 1-minute warning and then a gentle reminder, wrap it up at the conclusion of that time period. At the end of the interviews, they'll have an opportunity for closing remarks, and then we'll display the survey link, and the city manager may have some words at that time. All right. So with that having been said, we're gonna get the process started. So the first question is, please tell us about yourself, and we're going to start with Evander Collier.
Yes, thank you, Gary. So I want to thank everyone that came out that's live right now, taking the time out of their busy schedule. I know they can be doing something a little bit different, but the city of Opalaca make a decision on who the next police chief is going to be. I think that's very important. But a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Jacksonville. There's about 1 million people there. Some of y'all may be familiar with high school and played after graduating from.
Hey, Evander, you're not coming through. Your bandwidth is low. So I would suggest you trying, we'll come back to you, and why don't you try to get to a better place where you have better bandwidth and we can hear you.
Okay.
Okay. And so we're gonna kind of try and get to a different area so you can have better reception there, Evander. So I'm gonna skip you and we'll come back to you. Let's go to Steve Barrera.
Hi, everyone. Yes, sir. Hello, everyone. Thank you again, Gary. Appreciate it. Thanks for the introduction, and the people of Opalaca for taking the time to let me be a part of this process. So a little bit about myself. I was born and raised just in Fall River, Massachusetts, which is just south of Boston. Grew up in public housing, and as a product of that, I got to see and interact with some of the law enforcement on two different levels, get to see it. And from that, I saw some of the positive things that could happen if you had a good relationship with law enforcement. So that kind of lit a fire in me from a very young age, at which point I moved to Florida, Jacksonville, Florida in 1990. After graduating high school, I've been married for 26 years. I have 3 daughters, regular attendants at our local church in the faith. As far as professionally, I started my law enforcement career in 1992 as a reserve deputy with the Clay County Sheriff's Office. I thought it was important not only to get the experience, but I think volunteering also helped me to appreciate some of the other facets in law enforcement. So I volunteered for some time until I was hired in 1994 by the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office as an officer, at which time I was fortunate to be part of multiple specialized units, from the community policing unit when it first started under President Clinton, to a firearms instructor, general instructor, task force, things of that, and community affairs, and then SRO. In 2002, I was promoted to supervisor, and had the fortune of participating in a lot of different venues, including the city's blight, which helped to address the underlying causes of crime within the city, and also their community problem response teams, having a real strong community policing and community engagement component early on in my supervisory career. I also was able to participate in some of the federal PERF, Police Executive Research Forum, on intelligence-led policing. And during that time, was able to learn and become very effective in some of the tenets of intelligence-led policing. In 2017, I was approached and became the Assistant Chief of Community Affairs with the Clay County Sheriff's Office. And as a Chief of Community Affairs, I took the Sheriff's Office from a 2,000 person email list to over 2,000, over 2 million contacts through social media. I was also promoted to, I was later promoted in 2004 to the chief of logistics, where I was in charge of all of the sheriff's office facilities, vehicles, uniforms. I kind of got learning on the business aspect and was very efficient and effective in that area. And then in 2018, became the chief of patrol, and with the sheriff's office, dealing with issues ongoing now in today's law enforcement, from protests, recruiting and retention, and financial and funding issues. But being very effective as a chief of patrol, having double-digit reductions in both violent crime and property crimes. And here I am today.
Thank you, Mr. Barrera. Am I pronounced your name correctly, Barrera?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Collier, you had any luck getting to a better?
I don't know. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you a little better. Yeah. You want to try that again? Let's reset.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry for the technical. Yeah. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
It happens.
But at any rate, my name is Evander Collier IV. I'm originally from Jacksonville, Florida. I was born and raised there in Jacksonville on the north side of town, which is a predominantly African-American community. I attended high school at a high school called Rebold. Some people may be familiar with that school. I played football, ran track, and played basketball. After graduating from high school, I went on to the University of Florida and majored in nuclear engineering. My last year, I decided I wanted to fulfill a dream and become a police officer. So I left school, became a police officer in Jacksonville, and I was a police officer for over 31 years. And during my tenure with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, you look at Jacksonville. Jacksonville has about 1 million people there. The Sheriff's Office there has about 3,500 employees, 1,700 which are police officers. I moved through the ranks there, worked in a variety of different places, from patrolman to sergeant to lieutenant to assistant chief. And the most people I had under my leadership during that period was about 165 employees, which included patrol officers, sergeants, and lieutenants. And I worked in a variety of different areas there. I eventually got my bachelor's degree from UNF, University of North Florida, in psychology with a minor in criminal justice. I also have my master's degree in public administration from the University of Central Michigan. A little bit about my personality. I'm like one of those hard chargers. I'm easy to get along with. I'm very approachable. I'm a people person, and anybody that know me know that I like to make you laugh, just to make you comfortable, because I think that's very important. I like to make jokes, and not to make light of anything, but there's also a very serious side of me, because I am very business oriented. I like to work out in my free time. I like to read books. I like to play basketball. And when I'm reading books, I like to read self-help books or some type of leadership book. I have 2 children that are adults. My son just finished the Air Force. He did a few years there in the Air Force. And then my daughter actually just graduated from college just a couple of months ago at FIU here in Miami. So I spent a lot of time here doing that. I like to travel. I was also a youth football coach in the inner city for over 10 years, just really trying to have an impact on these young kids and now adults now, some of those kids who are doing an outstanding job right now. And I tell you, that's basically who I am, and I look forward to really engage you a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collier. Appreciate it. So we're going to go back to Mr. Barrera. Why are you interested in becoming the Opalaca police chief?
So when I learned of the job opportunity, being particular, looking obviously with a 27-year law enforcement career, looking and doing some research, I looked at Opalaca and I saw the posting and job opportunity. So before I applied, did a little bit of back research, and I looked at the agency and I was looking at the city, and the more I looked, more my research, I started to see what I thought was a community that was frustrated, community that was fearful, and it looked like they felt like their voices were not being heard, which I think is very important in the community. And I also saw an agency that I thought that lacked a clear direction and lacked the leadership necessary to get it to that point. So when I saw that opportunity and I saw that thing, knowing my experience as far as putting the building synergy within an agency to accomplish positive things within the community, I thought Opalaca would be a great opportunity, a great agency, a great city to work for, and also being that you look around, there's a lot of we're at the cusp of some change in Opalaca. There's a lot of things, a lot of positive things happening, and I thought that it would be good for me to be a part of that.
Thank you, Mr. Barrera. Mr. Collier, same question. Why are you interested in becoming the Opalaca police chief, sir?
Yes, great question. Listen, I have over 31 years of law enforcement experience, and 20 of those years were in leadership roles. And I can tell you that I still have the burning desire to continue to serve the public. I still have it in me. So that's one reason. The second reason is I have family and friends that's here in the Miami area that they've been asking me for a long time to come back to the Miami area and be around them. And so I was considering that. So I saw the posting for Opalaca, and I did some research, and I looked at the issues that was going on within the police department, where there was an assessment done. And the assessor said, there's like 12 bullets that needed to be addressed in order to make the department better and also move into 21st century police. And then I know that this from my research that the department is moving towards that. And I see an opportunity with my skill set, because anywhere I go, everywhere I've worked throughout the agency as a leader, I've made it better. And I know I can improve upon the agency with what they've already done. Secondly, the city, I saw the city has a 2030 strategic plan, and it's very ambitious. And part of that plan, they want to bring in some additional businesses, people, additional funds. In order to be able to do that, we have to make the community safe. Well, I have a track record throughout my career where violent crime was my specialty. When I was the commanding officer of our Operation Safe Street unit, I had 75 officers and 8 supervisors that worked under my command, and I put them in hot spots in the city, and we drove crime down. So that's what I'll do here in Opalaca. So with the strategic plan, we have to drive crime down. We drive crime down, we'll get people that want to come move into the city and also bring businesses there, which is going to help with the city's overall goal with the strategic plan. And I can give you an analogy how I look at this. On the side, I'd like to invest in real estate. And so I used to invest in property. So when you look at a house, you go look at a house and you look at it and it's got broken windows, you go inside, it's broken walls, everything just a big mess. People pass that and say, I don't want that. Well, I go and buy those properties and I fix them up just one room at a time, just a little piece at a time. And you come back and look at it. Now everybody want to buy the property from it. They want to rent the property. That's how I look at Opalaca. Opalaca has had their problems. Now that we got to have the right leadership in all facets of the whole city, including the police chief, with all us working together, and we can now meet the overall goal and make the city better and attract more people. And that's why I want to be a part of that, because I like to have ambition. I know what things can look like. You already know where we are today, but I know what it can look like, because I've been doing this not just in the police side, in my personal life.
Thank you for the answer. And we're going to stay with you for the next question. You're going to go first on the next question. What are your goals and vision to reduce violent crime in Opalaca? It kind of leads right into that.
Right. My goal, listen, I can give you an unrealistic goal. If I start tomorrow, we'll reduce crime. We'll start to see a reduction the same day. But that's not really realistic. Let's look at the big picture here. The big picture is this. Opalaca did not get in this situation overnight. It took time. So once again, when I was the Operation Safe Street commander, where at the time, Jacksonville, Florida was viewed as the #1 city for homicides. That was like in 2007, 2008. So I had a group of officers that I assigned to hotspots with specific goals and objectives. And they went out there and we were successfully able to reduce violent crime in those hotspots by 40%. I'm sorry, by 40%, and then homicides by 50%. Okay, so I would implement those same strategies, and that was the saturation part of it. Then I also had a group of officers that are assigned to some hot spots for problem solving. And that's what you really want. You want more long-term sustainable reduction. And I think to get that long-term sustainable reduction, that's going to happen within 60 to 90 days. But here's the thing. When I come in as the police chief, I want to sit down with my command staff, my detectives, everybody, so we can get a good understanding, and also community members to get a good understanding of what's really happening, why these things happen, and come up with a good strategic plan. But I already know what the plan is going to include some type of hotspot patrol, some type of problem solving, and some type of community engagement. All that will be involved in that, okay? But I can guarantee you this, in 6 months, you're going to really see the reduction. But you're going to see reductions in little hotspots throughout the city. That's just automatic when you do saturation control. That's going to happen. But I want to do something that's sustainable. But we can't do it by ourselves. We have to have the community involved.
Mr. Collier, a follow-up on that question. What do you say to folks out there that don't want the police to just stop every car in their neighborhood in the hot spot and get caught up in that mix?
Right. Here's the thing, and that's a good question. When I was over Operation Safe Streets, just by default, we were saturating areas, and we stopped a lot of people, whether pedestrian or drivers. You're gonna stop a lot of good people with some very minor violations. And my instructions to the officers is this: just because we can does not mean we should. We're not looking for those minor violations. We're more focused on looking for drugs, the wanted people, the most violent people, and the guns. That was the focus. So yes, by default, you're going to stop some of the good people, but we have to explain why we're doing what we're doing. That was the strong message I always sent to my people. We have to do that. Tell the people why, tell them thank you, and let them go. And that's how we would handle that. So by default, you may get stopped and you're one of the greatest people in the community, but I can guarantee you my officer is going to explain what they're doing and you won't be affected by that.
And are you going to message that in advance of any kind of strategy?
Yes, that's a part of the briefing when I meet with the officers. And that's my command staff. We meet, they'll have a laundry list of bullets that they will be addressing. And that'll be a part of that, about how you're going to treat the community, what we're actually looking for, and being able to stay focused.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it. Mr. Barrera, what are your goals in your vision to reduce violent crime in Opalaca, sir?
So I was also part of the Operation Safe Streets and part of that significant reduction piece. And I also was able to carry that experience over into another jurisdiction and be successful in that way. So first and foremost, I think the important thing is to know that you cannot arrest your way to prevention. Arresting alone does not simply solve any particular crime problem. I prefer to, when I hit a particular area or when we're addressing a particular crime problem, whether it be violent crime or property crimes, I usually do a triple approach. And this goes overall as an agency. You got an engagement piece, an environmental piece, and an enforcement piece. So in the engagement piece, obviously, so it is without a shadow of a doubt, law enforcement cannot be effective on their own. There's no way we can do it without the community's help. So with that being said, the only way we can gain the help of the community is to build trust and a relationship. And that comes through communication. That comes from a strong community engagement piece, from officers getting out of their vehicles and making contact with citizens, talking, having honest discussions up front about what's going on, creating opportunities to get the community engaged in what's going on with the police department, to know what the direction is, to know what the strategic plan is, what the goals are. And I think that helps what you were talking about earlier as far as stopping all the individual. I think a lot of the issues that are occurring today in law enforcement are due to a breakdown in that communication because of, breakdown in that relationship because of the lack of communication. So that's in the engagement piece. So, and then in the enforcement side, although when you have in hotspot policing, it's very easy to paint with a broad brush, but statistically, 6% of the population accounts for well over 60% of the crime that's occurring in a particular community. So if you're looking from an enforcement piece, although obviously there are situations where officers are out stopping cars and stopping individuals, if you focus your attention on those few individuals, those primary offenders, those repeat offenders, you can have a significant impact not only on crime within a 30, 60, 90-day window, but you can have long-term crime results a year, 2 year, 3 years out from the process, and following up on that. And then lastly is the environmental piece. If as a law enforcement agency, I know we have to wear a lot of hats, but as a law enforcement agency, if we go in simply with either an engagement piece or an enforcement piece, if we arrest an individual, the next day they could be out, 2 days they can be out. If we do not do anything and partner with some of our other city agencies, some of the local and state agencies, and do something to address the root cause, the location of where that incident occurred, and we let that environment, which helped foster that criminal activity, if we don't do anything to address that particular problem, then all we're doing is just repeating that cycle of arrest and release, arrest and release. So we're not really addressing some of those long-term crime problems that many of the neighborhoods are experiencing now.
Great. Thank you for that, Mr. Barrera. And we're going to stay with you for the next question. How do you plan to reach out to the community and show you care about the issues they face?
So that's probably one of the most important things to me, I think, in the law enforcement thing. So reaching out to the community, I think, like we talked about, in order for any successful police department, they have to establish a relationship. You have to have trust within the law enforcement community, where the people that we serve. So the only way to do that, to have that relationship, is for communication. So first and foremost, like I said earlier, officers getting out of their cars and actually engaging with the citizens that they're serving. I think that first and foremost starts that process of having a relationship. Myself as a chief of police and staff members, some of our beat officers and the supervisors, I'll get out there and walk every single location, every single beat that is within Opalaca, and make contact with the citizens of Opalaca and find out what the specific issues are. You can learn different things. You have, information from calls that come in, but there's no real way of knowing what's going on in the community unless you get out of your car and make face-to-face contact. That's how we can find out what's really going on within the community, and then really be able to put a strategy together to address that, both short and long term. So doing that in the engagement piece. So I would also establish regular meetings with some of the local church groups, business leaders, some of our community associations, and citizens in general. I was part of introducing a very similar program that was in Jacksonville. We called it the Sheriff's Net, and it was a total voluntary citizen group. It was advisory, and we met once a month with representatives of the sheriff's office, and it provided a direct channel from the citizens to me as the chief of patrol in order to address those problems. We have issues within the community that really only half of crime, typically actually less than half of crime that actually occurs is actually reported. And that is a huge concern, especially when you start talking about allocation of resources and where to put those resources and how to address those long-term problems. That piece, that direct link to through the chain of command to the chief is critical to getting that real information. The other thing, it would be leveraging technology. Like I said before, within the Clay County Sheriff's Office, we had a 2,000 person email list when we utilized things, social media, any of the venues, Twitter, Facebook, any new technologies that come in, Bluetooth technologies, text, a social media app on your phone, anything that would provide a channel of communication between the police department and the community can only lead to success for both the agency and a positive impact on the citizens.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. I appreciate it. Mr. Collier, how do you plan to reach out to the community and show you care about the issues they face?
Listen, this is reaching out to the community. I've been doing this since 1989 as a young police officer. When I came up, I worked in a predominantly African-American community. And in our neighborhood, they were afraid of the police, didn't really trust the police. The police never really just came out and just sat down, just talked to us, say, how you doing, young man, young kid, anything like that. They would just come and go, look for arrest and keep going. Well, so when I become a police officer, I'm going to always engage the community. So when you're out and about, there's always the opportunity to meet a community member and you talk to them, you gather what their issues are. You have to do these community walks. And I can tell you from my perspective, when I was a young lieutenant, I initiated and started our first lieutenant's walks. And what the walks were was basically I would grab a couple of sergeants and a couple of officers and we'll go walk in some neighborhoods, knocking on the doors, introducing ourselves, determining what the issues were, any concerns that the citizen had. And the biggest thing, how you foster those positive relationships, is follow up. You always want to follow up because people can care less of what you say, it's what you do. And we're going to be about doing. We're going to keep our word. Our word is bond. That's what we have to do. So we're going to go out and meet the community. We're going to go out and do knock and talks. We're going to make sure that we're accessible to the community and we're responsive. They have access to our department. The police department is paid by the taxpayers. So why can't they come there and be involved, be engaged, to kind of see what's going on? Because that fosters positive relationship. And also you get additional partners like that. So that's how we would engage them. We'll go knocking on doors. We'll go and have we'll start having monthly meetings with the community where we'll come out. We did this where I was working at previously, where once a month, I will go to a particular area of town and we would solicit the community to invite people to come in. The citizens will come in. We'll talk to the citizens, gather their concerns. We'll also advise them, update them about any concerns that we have, any crime issues that may be going on in that particular area so they can stay abreast of what's going on. And we'll also have an officer come out from some part of the agency to basically tell them all about that particular work, the work that they do, because they can find it interesting. And so that garner relationships, that proves credibility. But like I said before, we're going to get their issues and we're going to follow up because that's very important. You have to be engaged in the community in a positive way. You have to make sure that they trust you. And we're going to have every officer out there engaged in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collier. And we're going to stay with you for the next question. It's kind of piggybacked on what you've already what you both have actually said. But in particular, what does community policing look like in Opalaca if you're selected as a police chief?
I almost have to repeat what I just said a minute ago, but I can just tell you that community policing is about talking to the community in a non-threatening fashion. So I'll have policy and procedures that's going to specifically tell the officers how to community police. The officers also will be trained how to do it. I will also demonstrate to them when we do our community walks what community policing looks like. And it's just talking to somebody in a non-threatening way, seeing how they're doing, what their concerns may be, and then we take action on that. And I want to have every officer in our department community focused. The community is first. And that community policing is going to eventually become natural to them because they're going to have the training of how to do it. They're going to have the research that's going to be available to them. These officers will also come out. We'll do neighborhood walks, community meetings, like I just stated earlier. We'll capitalize on any current programs that you may already have that looks good. Coffee with a Cop is also a good program, how you can engage community, and that's still community policing on that part. But the nuts and bolts of community policing is just positive interactions with a citizen in a
Great.
non-police fashion. And that's what we would do. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Collier. Mr. Barrera,
Yes, sir.
what does community policing look like in Opalaca if you're selected as a police chief?
So kind of piggybacking on that, with community policing, citizens don't typically call law enforcement when they usually call us when there's something bad going on. We typically don't have a lot of positive interactions with the community. So community policing is pivotal to establishing that relationship outside of the typical law enforcement. I tend to look at it like credits. Because the thing is when we have, I would rather establish a relationship with the community prior to having any type of serious crime or crime event. Because if I have and establish that relationship and that communication with the community prior to something happens, when something does occur, then I've already established that relationship. I've already got those open lines of communication, and already have that system in place in order to assist us in being successful in whatever that endeavor might be. So if you know about community policing, so community policing is where the law enforcement function is driven strictly by the community's input. And which, like I talked about before, less than half of the crime being reported, that is a critical piece to trying to bridge that gap and reduce that number. And then if you look at intelligence-led policing is where it isn't so much community input, it is more data-driven. Well, like I said, you got that offset between, well, I've only got half the data or half the information because the community doesn't trust what we're talking about or doesn't trust us, which is huge in establishing that backdrop for engaging and moving forward. So what we try to do as an agency, what you want to try to do is try to bridge the gap between, raise the level of community policing. So intelligence-led is here and community policing is here. If I can increase the amount of citizen involvement, citizen input, then that tends to offset that thing, and both of those systems are in sync. Now, if you do that, I can assure you that if success rate, when you can put those two together, you're going to be in double-digit reductions. There's issues with violent crime in Opalaca. That system, I can assure you, it has been for 27 years in law enforcement. I can tell you it would be highly, highly effective at addressing a lot of those concerns. So what does community policing look like? I'll have to be honest with you. There are two different mindsets. You have a fixed mindset and you have an open mindset. So I have always been adaptive to particular needs depending upon what the situation is. I've put together, personally created multiple lunch with the laws and coffee with the cops and walks, and all of those are very effective. But I have to say, I think the most important thing, especially when the community policing goes, is having an open mindset in order to be adapted to the particular needs of that community. Studies are showing that, violent crime and situations can be down to very small. We talk hotspot areas are very small. It's that one house in your street block that people are having an issue with. Well, a general broad-based community policing program would work generally, but it may need to be tailored to specific communities based upon the needs in that particular area. Standard programs definitely would be part of my administration, the citizens academies and citizen advisory boards and all those bike patrols, anything and everything that gets us out of our comfort zone, engaging with the citizens and communicating about what is really going on in the city of Opalaca.
And as a follow-up, thank you for that answer. As a follow-up, you said that's going to help reduce crime. Is there anything else that's going to help do?
The community policing? Yes, or not just crime. It's the long-term relationship. Here's the thing. Law enforcement has worn multiple hats for many, many years. It isn't just in law enforcement. Law enforcement officers do all kinds of things. We do social work. We address underlying financial problems. This constant flow. So community policing, when you have that relationship, would also help reduce. So let me backtrack for a second. One of the things that initially happens in any law enforcement agency when you implement a community policing program, the calls for service actually go up. And a lot of times, a lot of people look at that, well, that's kind of contrary to what you were talking about. What in reality, when you have a community policing program and you're engaging the community and you're building that trust, like Mr. Collier had said, as far as being reactive to what they're talking about, once you establish that and they're more trusting of law enforcement, then they're more likely to call the police. Well, when you have that, the calls for service actually rise. But long term, it helps reduce it. But the community policing aspect, that relationship and communication, also helps to bridge the difference between an actual law enforcement function and a referral. If an individual does not need to be incarcerated, Very small, less than 10% of an officer's time is actually spent in quote unquote enforcement. Most of it is spent on other things, documentation and social service and referrals. That community policing block helps to increase the effectiveness of any police agency in addressing those particular problems and those particular issues, which makes the agency more effective, makes the city more effective, and the community more safe.
Great. So great. Thank you for that follow-up answer. So I'm going to stay with you for this next question. Regarding the protest and violence we've seen across the country, and specifically close to home there in Opalaca, what actions would you take, if any, if this were to occur in Opalaca?
All right, so let me start by saying this. The right to peacefully protest is a constitutionally protected right. As a law enforcement officer, as the chief of police, it is my duty, is my sworn obligation to ensure that that right is protected. So any peaceful protests, obviously ensuring we have sufficient staffing in place to make sure that they can safely conduct and do so. The problem that runs in, I think, when people protest, if you look at the underlying issue, most of them can be rooted in frustration and the fear that they have a lack of voice within whatever system it is that they're protesting. Right. What we're seeing now, I talk about especially with the recent protests, what we're seeing now is sort of a recalibration of what the community is expecting of their law enforcement officers and law enforcement community. It is up to us as an agency and as a profession to be adaptive to some of those changes to ensure that we're providing the services that the community wants, which is extremely important. So what a lot of people don't understand is with law enforcement, we all come from the same block. We all come from the same group of people, law enforcement officers, doctors, city leaders, all come from the same community, the same block. There's no real distinct difference. And we start with that, and we make sure, like we talked about with the community policing and the community engagement piece, if the community feels like they have a voice, if the agency is transparent, if the agency is objective and responsive to their needs, then you can help to address some of those. We had that incident in my county when I was the chief of patrol. We had not only do you have one set of protests, we also had opposing groups both at the same time. Again, a constitutionally protected right. We wanted to make sure that we did that. So one of the things that I did was not only did I, address obviously any security needs that we had there. I personally met with both of the individuals who were leading both of those protests, and I can tell you that's how I came to that conclusion of the frustration and the voice. And we were able to actually the protest still, the demonstrations, still continued. But I can tell you that a lot of the concerns that they brought to my attention were actually addressed, or at least looked at and worked on together, and they were kept updated as that continued. And it tended to address a lot of the issues, the underlying things that were going on. So the other thing was, so when it comes to the demonstrations, we also see nationally that a lot of them are being led by a few individuals who are antagonizers, who tend to incite the crowd and cause some of the disruption. Well, we know that most of the individuals that are out there protesting are not part of that. Just those few particular individuals, and obviously that would be the focus. When the protest shifts to a riot or unlawful activity, then it is my obligation as the chief to ensure that I protect the citizens, the citizens of the community, innocent citizens of the community, protect the property of the area, and act accordingly as far as to keep the peace and keep the safety of the community.
And that's the approach you use in Opalaca?
Sir?
And that's the approach you'd use in Opalaca?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Collier, same question regarding protests and violence that we've seen across the country, specifically close to home. What actions would you take if these protests occurred in Opalaca?
Yes, if Opalaca does not currently have dedicated personnel that are field force trained to handle protests, it will make sure that we have significant officers and supervisors getting that training so they can effectively deal with the protest. Now, if a protest, if we get intelligence, because we want to make sure we have a good intelligence unit where we're able to gather sufficient information to learn about the protest so we can understand the magnitude of it. I have a philosophy that I always believe in. You want to over prepare. So if we don't have sufficient officers to be able to respond to a protest, and we're going to reach out to our local partners, adjacent police agencies to send us some resources. We have to go on the state level, regional level, then we'll do that as well, because we want to make sure we have sufficient resources in Opalaca's community to effectively deal with a protest. Now, like Barrera stated, it is their constitutional rights. And we're there to protect not only the protesters, but the anti-protesters, the people that are against that. But we're going to meet with them because, like, I give an example. I've dealt with protests throughout my career as a supervisor and as a lieutenant. We'll meet with the individuals who's leading the protest. We'll establish parameters, what they can work within, and we'll let them know what our role is going to be as far as law enforcement. And we'll let them know that if they get outside of these parameters, then we may have to take some type of law enforcement actions. But intel is very important, so we can make sure we're going to have the right resources there. I can only use an example. What happened at the Capitol, I saw that coming. I would have, if I was the chief of that Capitol, I would have had the National Guard there, only because of the rhetoric. And it's not to state what party affiliation I am. It's just to only indicate that things were hostile, getting hot, getting heated. So we need to have a lot more resources there. And so that's what we do here in Opalaca. Make sure our officers are trained to respond. They know how to respond. We're going to also use the protests that happen in other cities as an example of what to do or what not to do. We're going to use those things to learn from and to grow from. And that's how I would do as a police chief. We're going to be learning and growing from the mistakes that other departments has made. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collier. And we're going to stay with you for the next question. You get to go first. Tell us your approach to building a team and gaining consensus amongst your staff to advance department goals. And then how would you make use of statistical data in your city? And what sources of data would you look at?
Well, to build a team, here's how I'll build my team. I'll meet with my command staff. I want to know what's working, what's not working, and what we need to do to improve. Based on the information that my command staff gives me, if I can make those immediate changes, we're going to make them. And when you do that, here's what you're doing. You're garnering trust. My people are going to know that their voices matter. I want them to tell me. I want them to talk to me. I want to pull that out of them without any repercussion. I don't care how small or big it is. I want to know, because I think it's important that you have an open relationship with your team. They can speak freely, but we don't all respect one another. So by having that free speech, having their input, and their input matters, then they're going to buy into helping you with your goals. So now, as the leader, I will establish those goals. Well, my team, my command staff, and whoever they recruit with them to achieve those goals, how we're going to get there, that's going to be on them, because that's how they learn and grow. I'm a guide. I'm going to give them the goal. They're going to tell me how we're going to get there. Okay? They're going to come up with a comprehensive plan. I'm going to review it. And if I don't like it, I'll just kind of guide them in the direction I think they need to go. But I'm not going to just outright tell them, because they got to grow and learn too. I'm not going to give them all the answers. Yeah, I'm going to give them some of them, but they got to learn and grow too. And I think that's how you foster a team, that we're in this together. I'm not going to let them fail. We're all going to win together. And that's how I would handle that part as far as building a team. As far as statistical data, how I make use for statistical data, statistical data tell you where you need to go, where you need to be from a police perspective. We can also use statistical data, because I would have, as a police chief, a weekly crimes meeting. And basically what you're doing, you're bringing in individuals throughout the department so we can talk about crime. And if we're talking about crime on a regular, we're talking about crime, we're talking about what we're doing about it, and we're sharing information. When you're doing that on a regular, that by default is going to start driving some of your crime down. Statistical data will also tell you whether you're making an impact or not, where you are today, and then where you are a week from now, a month from now. You can use that statistical data to determine how you're doing. and then you can also make adjustments for that. I mean, because I can tell you as the chief, my staff gonna be held accountable for the crime as well. All right, and that's how you hold them accountable, because they can look at those numbers every day, and they need to be coming up with a plan to address that. So that's how we use statistical data. Okay, now what sources would I use? So you can't just use, I wanna have a very strong crime analysis unit where they're able to put out crime data to let us know what's going on. But that's only one resource. The other resource you're gonna need intel from the streets. You need officers who have information. You definitely gonna need the community, because the community know exactly what's going on out the street, because a lot of crime go unreported. So
Right.
those are the resources that I want to use in order to get statistical data. And we'll use our local partners. They're going to have some additional data as well that's going on. So then you take all that information, you compile together, and you come up with a very comprehensive strategic plan to address your issues. But
Great.
you got to have the community involved, because that's the biggest piece right there. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. I have a follow-up. And it's a yes/no question. Are you also accountable for the crime in Opalaca?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
It stops with me.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Barrera, tell us about your approach to building a team and gaining consensus among your staff to advance department goals. And how would you make use of statistical data in your city? What sources of data would you use?
All right, so first and foremost, and this is not nothing that I created. Lou Holtz actually said it, and we live by it. And Ms. Carter is aware of this too. I really believe your people in your agency are looking for three things from a leader. They want to know if you care about them, they want to know if they can trust you, and they want to know whether you're committed to excellence. So, in order to build the team, your people need to know that they're valued, that their opinions value, that they matter. And their contribution to the agency can be impactful in a positive way. So first and foremost, I believe in the reverse. I don't think that as the chief of police, my people are there to serve me. I think that command staff and supervisors are there to serve the officers on the street and to help facilitate their job and making them more effective. So input from the ground up, all in and of itself creates a line of communication of being effective in the leadership role of knowing what the real problems are within the agency. If you have your officers at the ground level telling you about problems that make it all the way up to the chief, and those problems are addressed, I, as a division chief, one of the things that I did, which was kind of unusual, I guess at that time, wanting to know what was going on, I had regular meetings with the brand new officers and the officers on the street, so I could find out how to bridge that gap between information from the ground level all the way up to the top. So that would be part of that process. The other thing I did was bring in some of the officers and have input on and supervisors on budgetary concerns. That's the thing that typically most agencies do not involve some of the line level guys, or even some of the first line supervisors, and also had them participate in part of the strategic planning for the agency. What that does is we're in a generational shift in law enforcement. We're the recruiting and retention is a significant issue in any law enforcement agency. But what that does, when you create that synergy, you're having a succession plan to help fill the ranks and to help build long-term within that agency. Anytime an officer leaves a particular agency, you're looking at 3 times their cost in annual salary when they walk out the door. That can have a tremendous financial impact on a particular law enforcement agency, not only in finances, but it can also have a huge impact on experience and how effective they are on the street. So that would be how I would build the team in consensus. So like Ms. Collier, I also would have weekly crimes meeting and identify particular crime trends. I think it's important when you start talking about data. It is typically transparent, it's objective, we can defend it, and typically when you utilize strict data and like an intelligence-led policing thing, it is highly effective. So when we talk about crimes in the crime analysis unit, I have a lot of experience in this area. I think one of the things that we have a shift through the state, and actually I think FDLE is already involved in this. There's a shift from the UCR, which is Uniform Crime Reporting, to a NIBR system. So the NIBR system goes into a greater detail. It requires a lot more reporting from an agency, but it also provides very detailed information on what a particular crime trend or what is going on as far as particular crime trends. So any information that you get as the head of an agency, as the police chief, that can help you to make strategic decisions long term. How many projecting needs, staffing needs, vehicle needs, locations, deployment resources. There is no greater resource in any law enforcement agency than the human resource. And I think as the chief, I want my people to know that they are valued. Obviously, you have issues you have to address. There is a responsibility and accountability. Responsibility to act appropriately is everybody's, but the accountability is the individual's piece when they do not. And that is also part of the equation of making sure everybody is on the same page, because your people are watching on what you value as important. And it is also important that I model that kind of behavior, that what I expect of them.
Right. And that you're out of time there.
Okay.
So, but I think you did answer the question. I'm going to stay with you for the next question. What experience do you have with establishing and maintaining partnerships with surrounding police agencies?
Well, obviously as a division chief, I had it, but I'll just say this: early on in my career, even as an officer with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, I learned and started at the beginning the value of having a relationship, not only with other law enforcement officers from adjoining agencies or outside, state agencies and so forth. But I also learned the value of partnering with some of the other city entities, state entities. I actually became, even as an officer, one of the individuals that they would consistently call to address some of the city's worst problems, all because of the relationships that I had established with some of the adjoining agencies that made it very effective at addressing a particular problem. I had, as a supervisor there, I was in charge of units that worked for the sheriff's office, were actually assigned to, for example, in the blight, which addressed some of the underlying conditions in a particular neighborhood that fostered crime. One of the officers that worked for me actually worked for the electric company. So utilizing that. So when I went to the Clay County Sheriff's Office, outside agencies, we had agencies within our jurisdiction, municipalities that we had to have a relationship with. And for example, one of those protests that we had talked about earlier actually bridged between, started in the municipality and came out into the county. So it required a joint effort between the two agencies. So law enforcement, and no matter what the agency, no matter what the department, there are very few that have sufficient resources to cover all of the possible contingencies that they may face as an agency. So it is critical to have that relationship with the surrounding and utilizing shared resources in the event of a specific need. So again, I had coordinated multiple events and issues with the agencies within the municipality. I also coordinated with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, which was our neighboring agency, on particular task forces to address some of the hotspot crimes or some of the spikes that we had in particular issues. Mm-hmm. And also some of the state agencies leveraging some of their resources to address some of our local crimes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Barrera. Appreciate that. Mr. Collier, what experience do you have with establishing and maintaining partnerships with surrounding police agencies?
Yes, great question. I think it's very important to have strong relationships with your partner, your surrounding partners. And for that reason, you want to establish those relationships and have strong partners, because we're all going to be helping each other out. And I've done that throughout my career as an officer, sergeant, lieutenant, and also as an assistant chief. But most specifically, I'll take a look, and I'll look at when I was a sergeant over our burglary unit. We had burglaries that were occurring in Duval County. Also, those suspects were going to the surrounding counties like Nassau and Clay County, committing some burglaries. So we we met with all of those. We met with individuals from Clay County and also Nassau County with my detectives, put a task force together. And then ultimately what ended up happening is we arrested those individuals and was able to get charges in all 3 of those counties. Okay, so we put those together with that. When I was a commander over our Operation Safe Streets unit, we were tracking some violent criminals that were committing robberies, not only in Jacksonville, but also they were committing robberies in the surrounding county, in Clay County. And so what I did, I had my officers along with some Clay County officers. They were all working together because we were staking out different places in Duval and also Clay County. And we were successfully able to actually arrest the suspects in another county though. And so that was great because all of us were working together in order for the common goal. So I just think it's very important that we have those partners in the surrounding agency. I've had experience doing it. I know the importance of it. That's going to be my first order of business if I'm selected as the police chief, is to call these chiefs that surround us so we can establish relationships.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Okay, and we're going to stay with you for the next question. What will you do to bridge the gap to create better relationships between the public and the police?
Yes. Listen, the public has to trust us, the police. We have to be transparent and we have to be accountable. I'm going to be transparent. I'm going to be accountable, and my entire agency is going to be transparent and accountable. We have nothing to hide. Listen, we can have citizens doing ride-along so they can understand how these officers work. We can allow citizens to attend my weekly command staff meetings. They can come in as observers. When we have our crimes meetings, they can come in as observers. However, when we talk about tactics, they won't be a part of that, but they can come in and observe what we're doing. And that lends credibility so they can have the faith that we're making efforts to fix the crime problem. So, that will be open to that, having citizens participate in that. I want to also meet with the public and solicit their input, what's going on in their communities when I do these walks. And then we're going to take action. And like I said earlier, people don't believe what you say is what you do. That's important. We're going to make sure we have follow-up, that we're reaching back out to citizens and let them know what's exactly is going on. And they may not agree with us with some of the things we do, but we're going to have to just keep meeting. As long as the citizens continue to meet with us, we're going to always continue to have these strong relationships. I would allow citizens to organize meetings that I will come in as the leader, and also some of my staff members can come as well. Because that helps bridge the gap. Because like I say, the citizens got to have these informal meetings and conversations with the police department in order to trust them. And that's how you bridge the gap. But as the leader, I would take the lead on that and do it.
So let me do a little follow-up on these meetings that let's say citizens call a meeting, and you're gonna show up at the meeting. You're gonna bring some of your staff. Would you just bring the lieutenants, or would you bring line level folks as well?
Yeah, I'll bring line level folks as well, because here's the thing. Depending upon where the meeting is at, I would like to have the officers and a supervisor that work that particular area there.
Okay.
Because what that does is that allows the citizens to meet the officers actually working that area. It allows the officers to know the people that's working in those areas, and it allows the officer to have those relationships. So anytime I would do, and I'm glad they brought that question up, anytime I would have these community meetings and I would go out, I would always have when I was a lieutenant, an assistant chief, I would always have a line officer and a supervisor there that work that particular area, because that's very important.
Thank you for that, Mr. Collier. Thanks for the clarification. Okay, Mr. Barrera, what would you do to bridge the gap to create better relationship between the police and the public?
So, we already talked about, we already addressed some of the community policing programs. I think all of those are worthwhile, and all of them will help to build a better relationship with the community that we serve. But let me say this. So we talked about law enforcement. Less than 10% of their time is spent in the quote unquote police work, which means what happens with the other 90% of what they're doing. So first and foremost, the gap between what they do to respond for calls for service and their free time. Usually we want to keep it around 45% so they can do proactive law enforcement. They can engage the community with that time. So ensuring that we have sufficient staffing that they can do that is an important part of, as an agency, having that broad approach to ensuring that we're engaging all elements of the community. So many law enforcement is a service industry. So one of the innovative things that we were doing, as I was doing as a chief of patrol and the other members of the agency, we actually went to Disney World. We talked about Chick-fil-A. What does Chick-fil-A do? They sell chicken. I mean, it really they sell good chicken, but it's not you would figure that with the quality, but they do it in such a way that it provides an experience. It's a service. Law enforcement is a service industry. Disney does the same thing. Disney is an amusement park, but their level of service. So what we did is go to Disney World and try to incorporate some of the fundamental elements of Disney's customer service model and incorporate that into a law enforcement perspective. So one of the key things that we came up with were safety, for example, safety being a model for it ends up doing as a framework for the agency to operate. It's not like policies and procedures. Policies and procedures are very directive. They're very problem specific or issue specific, but this provides that kind of framework in which all of the agencies, all of the members of the agency operate under. So safety being the first one, obviously taken into consideration and approach when they address a citizen's concern or anything else, that safety being first and foremost. We had efficiency, looking at a continuous improvement model with the fixed mindset, open mindset. In any profession, you don't want to have a fixed mindset and be stuck in one particular area. The world is constantly changing. As a chief, I need to make sure that I'm adaptive and always, industry best practices, law enforcement best practices. I also need to make sure that my agency could do that as well. Then we had responsiveness, obviously delivering timely service and courtesy and doing it in a professional manner. So as tenants, one of the things to build the gap to a better relationship would be to provide a framework for the agency, a model, so to speak, or a guide in which how the agency is going to operate. Again, we have all those community policing functions and all of those things, and they're all valuable. But I think as the agency as a whole, having a framework to operate out of, kind of a guide of how it's going to move forward, I think that is going to be instrumental long-term in building each step to a stronger relationship.
Thank you, Mr. Barrera. And we're going to stay with you for the next question. What experience do you feel you bring to Opalaca that will reassure citizens that they will be protected and feel safe to enjoy their town day or night?
Okay, so let me just touch real quick on the feeling of safe. So one of the things that I had a strong background in, I was in high school, I was an architectural and machine draftsman. Totally off the cuff for a law enforcement professional, but it actually helped when going into what they call CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design. Basically, it's a study of how the environment impacts criminal behavior. So obviously bringing that expertise, I actually ran the state's, I was a director for the Florida Design Out Crime Association, one of the directors, and I was also served as the chair. Bringing that aspect in would be critical. But Maslow hierarchy of needs says that you have the lowest level, have obviously that you have food and safety needs. So when you talk about feeling safe, if a community does not, the fear of crime is actually more pervasive than an actual criminal element. I have been, in my experience in the 27 years, I have been to some neighborhoods who have a pretty significant, on paper, on data, crime issue. But when you talk to those citizens, they'll tell you that they feel safe. And then in reverse, I've been to some areas where statistically there isn't a lot of crime, but those individuals do not feel safe. I'm going to tell you, more importantly than the crime, if the citizens of Opalaca, the feeling of safety and having it actually be safe, having those two married together is a critical importance. It drives every decision that goes on. For example, if the citizens of Opalaca do not feel safe, if the community around it does not feel safe, businesses are not going to come in and set up shop within the community. They're not going. It's going to impact how the police department operates. It's going to dictate how government operates. So that piece, and I've had a lot of experience in this area of changing the perceptions, rebranding. I've been a part of 2 rebranding models, and all in an effort to ensure and guarantee the community, 1, we're addressing it, but 2, this is the approach in which we're taking, and that their concerns, their worries, their fears are very important. Very important to me as the chief, very important to me as a law enforcement officer, and it'd be important to my agency as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Mr. Collier, what experience do you feel you bring to Opalaca that will reassure citizens that they will be protected and feel safe to enjoy their town day or night?
Yes, I have 31 years with Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, and I've mentioned this earlier, and I have 20 years in leadership roles. And I've always been responsive to the community. And as a chief, we're going to always be responsive to the community. I've always had success, no matter what role I played in combating violent crime as an officer, as a sergeant, as a lieutenant, and as an assistant chief. We always had positive impact on violent crime. Now, so I have a proven track record. So the strategy that I'm going to use to combat the crime problem, we're going to use saturation patrol with specific instructions for the officers, make sure we're not violating anybody's rights. That's going to be one way to make it safe. We're going to also do problem solving. That's going to make it safe. We're going to do community engagement, get the community involved. That's going to help make it safe. But, you know, we can drive the numbers down, which I had success with in Jacksonville when I was a police assistant chief and as a lieutenant. We can drive these numbers down. You know, I could pat myself on the back, pat my command staff on the back, the officers, everybody for doing a great job, the city manager and the city mayor, all to be happy the numbers are down. Well, that's all great. But the bottom line is, do the citizens feel safe though? So we could talk about numbers all day long. The key is, do the people feel safe though? And so now how do you make people feel safe? And this is how you do it. Because we can tell the public all day long these numbers are down. But if they don't feel safe, the numbers not down in their mind. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that we're going to go out and solicit the community where we know the numbers are down now. We're going to solicit information from them. What can we do to make you feel safe? We're going to get that from them. What can we do from a law enforcement perspective? If we can do it from law enforcement perspective, we will. If we have to use some other resources to do it, then we're going to reach out to those other resources to help facilitate that. And that's what I would do. And I can guarantee you it's going to happen. We'll be able to drive crime down. We're going to also be able to make them feel safe. We can't make them feel safe until they give us the information we need in order to make them feel safe. So we got to have that community involvement and that community piece. It's always circle back to the community. We can't do it by ourselves. We're not going to be able to wrest our way out of this situation, but we got to have the community involvement always. And I've done that throughout my entire career. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collier. And we'll stay with you for the next question. What do you see as the police department's role in assisting the unhoused population?
You know, throughout my career, when I was the assistant chief of our downtown district, where at the time I had about 165 officers, and that includes sergeants and lieutenants. And our downtown district is a population of about 150, 200,000 people. And it was like the favorite place for the unhoused individual. I call, if I keep saying unhoused, I'm gonna get confused, but the homeless population.
Okay.
And those individuals, some of them want to be homeless. Some of them have mental issues that need to be addressed, social issues that need to be addressed. So we have to meet with those social services entities so that we can partner with them to go out there and give these individuals the services they need so they can not be unhoused anymore. So we got to find resources to try to help them. But, but we have to be realistic. When you have these unhoused individuals, they become a nuisance at times. That's when they're hanging out in public places, like in front of a supermarket or something, a business, and they're constantly calling us about this individual hanging out here. So now they already have the trespass on them. So now the officer has the tie. If we've already tried to provide that individual resources to get help, and they're refusing those resources, they're still hanging out in those same places, then we have no choice but to either, if they meet the Baker Act criteria, we'll do that. But if they need to be arrested, we'll do that, because we have to give some, you got to help the citizen, the business owner. So it's a two-edged sword, but my primary objective would be to educate these officers so they understand how to effectively deal with the homeless population. But we'll be partnered with our social services entities to go out and try to help these people. Thank you.
Thank you. So if I'm hearing you right, you're saying that you're going to partner with social service agencies, and so it's not 100% your role. You're just a first responder.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yes. That's what I'm saying is that the unhoused population is a social services problem. We as the law enforcement, we would be there to support them. So, but it's really a police problem as well, because we get calls about it. We're going to get calls
Right.
about it.
Right.
So we're going to have to partner with those entities to come up with strategic plans to effectively deal with them.
Okay.
And
Thank
provide them services.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Mr. Barrera, what do you see as the department's role in assisting the unhoused population?
Well, first off, I think with the impact of COVID-19 and that impact on the economy, I don't think that population is going to get any smaller. I think that's going to continue to be a significant issue. So the way I look at it in the homeless population, you break it down into three specific categories. You have those that are suffering from mental illness, and obviously, looking at the training levels of the agency. If they're not up to speed on what they call CIT training, critical incident training, making sure that they have all the affected personnel have the appropriate training on how to deal with individuals with mental illnesses. And that also branches out into those that are not homeless, but in that category of individuals. So like Mr. Collier had said, I think once that's identified and they've had the appropriate training, part of that is the partnership with social services agencies and to make referrals. We had issues with the homeless veterans, and I know there were resources that we actually had within my prior jurisdiction that we were able to effectively eliminate any of the homeless veterans who wished to be housed. They were all taken care of and removed from the streets especially in gratitude to their service. So especially with mental illness, going with the getting the appropriate assistance and partnering with some of those social service agencies to have an appropriate response, whether that be Baker Act, long-term care, which has also happened. The other element within the unhoused or homeless population is the criminal element. A lot of times you'll have individuals who are trying to take flight from law enforcement that utilize kind of the vagueness of being homeless and the kind of melting into that population with the intent on trying to elude law enforcement. So those individuals, those that are intent on committing criminal acts, which there are that portion of that population which have no intentions of not getting the assistance that they need to commit criminal acts. Those are the ones that you look at for enforcement action and ensuring that they're incarcerated, because that is their sole purpose. And then the other individuals that we find is the destitute, those that are just wishing not to be homeless, don't have particular mental illness, but at the current moment don't have the financial resources in order to get themselves in a place where they're not to be homeless. Again, that is not, obviously that part of it is not law enforcement, but as in any law enforcement agency, we're usually the first ones to get there. So having a strong partnership, I had met regularly with a local agency called the Mercy Network, and they had multiple page after page of resources that were available to any of my personnel in order to make the appropriate referral to the appropriate location in order to get those people off the streets and back on their feet. So I think that in and of itself, and as a caveat, when we talked about, like I said, with the community engagement and the enforcement and also the engineering part, there are specific environmental things that can be done when you partner with some of the other agencies that can be to help mitigate or minimize some of that impact. For example, at bus stops and those kinds of things. There are things that can be done in addition to an enforcement and education and referrals to try to help with that particular issue.
Great. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Okay, Mr. City Manager, are you still on the call?
Yes, I'm here, sir.
Yeah, do you have any additional questions? I'm going to go to the closing statement for the individuals if you don't have anything further.
I do have one question.
Please. It would be Mr. Barrera first.
Mr. Barrera, how do you deal with political pressure when it comes to dealing with day-to-day police operations?
Could you define political pressure exactly? I'm not really sure where you're going.
So pressure from elected officials in regards to your operations of your police department.
So, obviously I think when we talk about the political pressures, I think we're talking about a lot of the, if you look at any given scenario, maybe the long-term impacts or long-term consequences. I think when we talk about that, you're looking at the community opinion of a particular issue. That would create some of that political atmosphere, something contrary to the masses. If it's in that situation, I think that community engagement, that community piece, that communication helps guide some of that political thing. You're talking about your constituents. You're talking about those that are electing the county commissioners and so forth. Their needs as a whole need to be addressed as a guide for the law enforcement agency. If it's particular to one individual, a problem, things that are, if you define it as political, obviously our current state of the relationships within the community and law enforcement, that could be defined as a political type pressure. I think, again, it goes back to addressing some of the underlying issues, some of the fundamental problems that are going on within our profession and helping to bridge that gap to address that issue. As far as that's concerned, if you're referring to maybe on like the individual, hey, that this person, I understand the long-term consequences as far as what it does on the political side, but maintaining and modeling the utmost integrity as the chief of police, to me, is more important than any other factor that may come involved. Doing the right thing the first time, every time is how I do business. So as far as that piece is concerned, but I do understand the long-term consequences of, the political environment at the time. And usually that has to do with a current issue anyway, that should be addressed, that should be looked at, that should be, worked through, even on the short term and the long term.
Thank you. The reason I asked that question is Opalaca from time to time can be a very politically charged environment. If you look at the history of Opalaca over the last 10 years. So we want to, make sure we have a police chief in place that's able to be strong in kind of dealing with those issues.
I didn't get a chance to answer the question.
Yeah, I was going to say we can get.
Oh, you're going to.
Thank you for the answer. Thank you. You ready for my response? Because I'm ready to jump right in, but I didn't want to interrupt the city manager since he was providing some additional insight.
Do you need me to repeat the question?
No, I have. Because listen, I was sitting back listening to Barrera give his response, and I was just thinking about my career. I've had various roles throughout the sheriff's office, and I've had political pressure throughout my entire career. And the unfortunate thing is, city officials, they don't know how to take no sometimes. They think that they're entitled. And I live by this philosophy here. And I've always been like, because I'm a very strong person, and I have a lot of courage too. And I don't have a problem telling the person no, but I'm gonna tell them why. Listen, we got to do the right thing at all time for all the right reasons. And I can look at a person square in the eye and tell them that this is not the right thing to do. They may disagree with me. They may try to go above my head and show the fear. They're going to go talk to the city manager. They're going to go talk to the mayor and things of that nature. But that's not going to move me, because we're going to make sure we're doing the right thing at all times. And it's going to be consistent, not only just within the police department, it's out there in the community. Because if I'm a do those political favors for city officials, then I need to be doing the same thing for the citizens out there, because they deserve it as well. But I'm not going to get in that slippery slope. I'm going to do the right thing no matter who I'm faced with. And that would be my response to how I would handle a politically charged situation. If it's the right thing to do, I'm going to do it. If it's not the right thing to do, we're not going to do it. And I'm not going to do it just because a city official said do it. We have to make sure that's something that we need to be doing. And that's how I would handle it.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, let's go back to Mr. Barrera. Mr. Barrera, is there any additional information you'd like to share in the time we have left? You've got 4 minutes for a closing remarks, or anything else you want us to know about you.
Well, kind of piggybacking on what we said, I'm not sure if I conveyed that I'm in my 27-year law enforcement career. A lot of people don't know this. My father was a World War II veteran, and if he were alive today, he would be 103. He would be 103 years old. I grew up in public housing, like I had said. There wasn't a whole lot of money in the coffers, but I can tell you one thing that my daddy left me, and that was his name. And I've done everything in my life and in my career to try to make that mean something. And standing for what's right and doing the right thing is something that is fundamental and a cornerstone in how I do business. We are only products of our expectations. The citizens of Opalaca have two very qualified candidates, I think, in front of them. They have the decisions to make and to help with that decision and with the city officials. And I'm sure whatever decision they make will be the right one for them. But I think and the same thing, if we continue to do what we've always done, we're going to continue to get what we've always gotten. So maybe a change. I have like Mr. Collier, I have decades of experience. I have a proven, documented record of success and a record of building teams and building an agency to be successful. So with that being said, I don't want to keep everybody here. I know they've been here for quite some time. I'm committed to the community and committed to doing the right thing for the city and for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrera. I appreciate it. Mr. Collier, what additional information would you like to share in closing remarks?
Yes. First of all, I want to thank the citizens that tuned in, to take the time out of their busy schedule to tune in and be in a position to help the city of Opalaca make a very important decision of the next police chief for Opalaca. Like I stated earlier, I was born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida, and I worked there for over 31 years with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. And I predominantly worked in African-American communities with success my entire career. So I understand the people. I understand what the needs are. I'm very familiar with that. Another thing that I've done is that, when I saw this opportunity, I've been doing my research and homework. So I've been watching the city council meetings over the last couple of months. And in those meetings, the reason why I've been watching those meetings, so that if I'm ever selected as the police chief, I can get off and get to running. I can hit the ground running right now. But in those meetings, I understand when the city officials stated that we need to make sure we're training our officers on the use of force, training them on the mental health and de-escalation. I understand that because we did that with my police agency, and we'll do that with the Opalaca Police Department, because training is key. We have to be training the officers, particularly we have to be training on these current issues that's causing these police departments to get sued. We're going to be ahead of that. We're going to do that. And I hear the community leaders when they say we need to have officers in these communities that really connecting with the people so that they can get information. We need people from those communities. I understand that. I'm from those communities. I've trained officers how to navigate the people in those communities. And there's a way to do it. And I'll teach my officers how to do that so we can navigate. So I understand the community leaders when they say we need people that look like them or act like them so that they can be a lot more helpful in the community. So and effective. So I'll make sure that's going to happen. And I also understand with the city challenges, we're going to be physically responsible. One of the things I'm going to do if I'm selected as a police chief, we're going to do a top-down review assessment of the entire agency. Because we're going to make sure we're being effective and efficient. We're going to plan ahead of time. You know, when it comes to training and anything else, we're going to plan it out. You know, what training you think you might want to go to. We're going to have all that stuff in order. So I just want to let you know that I'm a very dependable person. I'm accountable. I'm transparent. I can be depended upon. And what you see is what you get. I'm a straight shooter. I tell you like it is. You may not like it, but we're going to still be friends right after we get done talking. So I want to thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Collier. Appreciate that. And I want to thank both candidates. I appreciate both your efforts. Mr. City Manager, you want to say a few remarks before we display the survey link?
Yes. First, I would like to thank the candidates for participating in this process. This multi-layer process is very important to me as a city manager, make a selection. As a city manager, I could have just selected a police chief and not did a search, but I decided to do a national search to get strong candidates to take the police department to the next level. Somebody with a law enforcement background, as myself, I believe it's very important to have the best person in the right place at the right time. You two are very, very qualified candidates, very strong backgrounds, working in county law enforcement agencies, and I think that's a very wonderful trait to have. I look forward to meeting you all tomorrow and going through our tour and kind of taking it from there. So thank you, and I thank the public, and we'll put up the survey link and we'll go from there. And I ask the public to please provide their comments no later than Tuesday, the 2nd, I believe, is the deadline. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll leave the screen open. Is your IT going to put there? It is. Great. And we'll leave that up for a few minutes so folks can write it down, and we'll go off on mute here. Thanks everyone for attending.